One of the most common questions I get when I'm teaching at guilds and leather shows all over the nation is, hello everyone, my name is Daniel Reeks. This is Weaver Leather Supply. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the questions I get asked more often than any other when I'm teaching workshops and guilds all over the nation. And that is, what maul or mallet should I use for tooling leather? And not only are we going to answer that question, but we're going to answer 3 more for you today as well. Before we can even talk about which maul or mallet you should be using, we have to answer another question first, and that is, how heavy of a maul or a mallet should we be using? Unless you're built like Superman, these things can get really heavy if you're using some of the larger ones. You get shoulder fatigue, you get forearm fatigue. So because of that, I'm always going to point you to the lighter mauls and mallets for tooling leather. So what exactly do I mean when I say a lighter weight maul? Well, this is the one that I use. It's a 16-ounce maul from Barry King. Now, 16 ounces is a really good weight to tool with, especially when it's as balanced as this one is. But it's not heavy enough to, like really drive a stamp in. You probably want a little bit heavier maul for that. But at the same time, while it's not heavy enough to really drive in a stamp, it's also not so heavy that it's going to really wear out my arm while I'm sitting there tooling for, sometimes hours. So a step up from that in terms of weight would be the Maul Master. And while the one I tool with is 16 ounces, this one is 22 ounces. Now, could you tool with this one? Absolutely you could. It'd be a little bit heavy after a while, but you could absolutely tool with this one. What it's really going to excel at would be like stamping. If you're doing scales or a basket weave or something like that, where you're not constantly tapping, this is going to be fantastic. That extra little bit of weight really helps set those stamps without having to hit them more than once. So one difference I want to point out really quick between the Barry King 16 ounce and the Maul Master 22 ounce is that the Barry King has a flared grip on it. So if you're going to be holding this thing by the handle, it's going to be a lot more comfortable in your hand than this one will be. But like we said, this one's more for tooling. This one's more for stamping, even though you could tool with this one. So that brings up another question, and that is, how do you hold it? How do you hold a maul or a mallet? Well, they're going to be held very differently. With a maul, you have the option of either gripping it by the handle, like you kind of like you would with a hammer, or you can grab the handle and the head of it. And this is going to give you, in my opinion, the most control over it when you're tapping the stamp and trying to create that image. It's a lot easier to control it here than it is back here. It's more forward heavy. When you hold it like this, you really get that balance where it just bounces back and forth. So one of the things I am guaranteeing that somebody would ask me in the comments is, should I be using a cylinder head or a tapered head? And really it comes down to you. The big advantage of a tapered head maul is that when you're stamping, you can have a lower angle on your arm and still get a square hit on it, versus with a cylinder, you have to raise that elbow a little higher so you get that perpendicular strike. That's the big difference between the two. Now, why would I choose a mallet over a maul? Well, if I'm tooling, personally, I wouldn't. Now, having said that, I know a lot of leather crafters, some of them would be considered legends, that I've watched do fantastic tooling with a mallet. For me, I like the grip on a maul for tooling better than I do the grip on a mallet for tooling. There's a lot of forearm action in that you don't necessarily get in this. The other thing, this has more of a hammer motion. So I tend to use these for driving punches, really driving a stamp if I need a just deep impression, punching oval, oblong holes, that kind of thing. That's what I'm going to be using a mallet for. So what about that big boy that was sitting on the table here? Well, this is my 16-ounce maul that we've already looked at. This is the one I use for tooling. This is the 32-ounce maul from Barry King, and this thing packs a punch. So could I use this thing for tooling? Yeah, you absolutely could. I personally could tool with this for about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, something in that range, before I started getting fatigued enough in my forearm and in my shoulder to where I'd get sloppy. Primarily, these are going to be used for punching holes, punching ovals, cutting the ends of belts. That's what you're going to use a big maul like this for. So one of the ones that didn't quite fit in that group at the beginning was this hammer from CS Osborne. This is a hammer that you typically would see in the toolbox of somebody who works with horses. I have it in my collection, in my arsenal, because I like how heavy the head is. I like how smooth and flat the face is. And with those three things combined, it's perfect for closing up stitch holes. Now, one quick word of warning. This is not something you would use with stamps. Anything metal, whether it's a punch or a stamp, we don't want to use metal on metal because it's bad for both of them. So you tell me, is there a question about mauls or mallets that I didn't answer that you think, the group would like to know? Let me know in the comment section below. You never know, it might end up in the video in the future. But that's going to do it for this video. I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, go make something amazing.